Thank you, and I'd like to thank my colleague from North Carolina for those comments. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to talk about an important congressional reform initiative that I have introduced in this body. You know, I've had the opportunity to study Congress from virtually every angle. Graduated from college as a young intern who drove up here having never been north of Tennessee. And as my predecessor had said, I shared it, never thought I'd meet a member of Congress, much less have the great opportunity and honor to be one. And then through virtually every staff role over the past 15 or 20 years, I've had a chance to study this body. But there are a few experiences now as a sitting member of Congress that I simply cannot accept. And one of them, the most pressing one, is the amount of time that members of Congress are expected, or in some cases directed, to spend raising money. We all know it. Every member of Congress understands that you arrive with great expectations only to learn the obligation to spend time raising money. And there is a quiet anger among many members about that. It is not comfortable to talk about. Frankly, this is one of the more uncomfortable speeches I will ever give in the well of this House. But we must. Because when does this become the expectation? You see, this is an orientation slide for freshman members of Congress that was produced by one of the two major parties in this country a few years back, suggesting that as a member of Congress, your first responsibility is 4 hours a day, not in your office, but across the street in a call suite, asking people for money. Another 1 to 2 hours a day networking, raising money, and only 2 hours a day doing your job. Members of Congress might have a quiet anger, but the American people will have a very loud anger when they understand that we are not accomplishing things here because we are spending too much time raising money. Let's turn that anger into resolve and change this body and change Washington forever. You know, former members of Congress are happy to talk about this. Retiring members who write confessions saying they spent 4,200 hours raising money. Former majority leaders of the other body now writing a book lamenting how much time they spent raising money. A colleague of ours leaving this House calling fundraising the main business of Congress. But what do they all have in common? They're all retiring or retired. Why don't we do something about it as sitting members of Congress? Why don't we fix this now when we have the opportunity instead of lamenting it when we're gone? It's why I have introduced what I call the STOP Act. And it's very simple. It is 3 or 4 pages. Every member of this body can read it before they vote on it. It simply prohibits direct solicitation of a campaign contribution by a sitting member of Congress. State legislators in the state of Florida and across the country are often prohibited from directly soliciting. 30 states where judges are elected, they are prohibited from directly soliciting contributions. And I want to say thank you to my colleagues who have co-sponsored this. In just over 3 weeks, we have 6 co-sponsors. Mr. Nolan of Minnesota, Mr. Jones of North Carolina, Mrs. Duffy and Ribble of Wisconsin, and Mr. Micah and Mr. Nugent from my state of Florida. The message is very simple on this. It says to Congress, get back to work. Let's do our job, the job we are elected to do. You see, we will never solve border security and immigration reform. We will never balance the budget. We will never address national security and foreign policy. We will never address tax reform if we have a part-time Congress in a full-time world. In any other profession, if you spent 20 to 30 hours a week doing a job other than you were hired to do, you would be fired. But in Washington, we accept this as the political culture. Many will say the issue is dark money, the issue is transparency. Fine, we can have a campaign finance debate, but that's not what this is about. This is a congressional reform. I will close with this, Mr. Speaker. Each one of us made a promise to roughly 700,000 people in the community from which we come and we represent. We made a promise to do our job, not to ask them for money. We took an oath. We each took an oath, swearing to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States, but the last line of our oath says, I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of this office on which I am about to enter. Friends, we are not well and faithfully discharging the duties of this body when we are spending 20 hours a week asking people for money and not doing our job. We are not well and faithfully discharging the duties of this office when fundraising is the main business, when we have members missing votes to raise money, when the most important question sometimes among colleagues is not what legislation are you working on, but how much money have you raised. We are not well and faithfully executing the duties of this House when we are not doing our job. I stand here not to judge my colleagues. I stand here to try to change the system. Let's restore credibility to this House. Let's honor the greatness of this body with greatness of integrity, greatness of commitment, greatness of resolve. Let's recognize the great calling of this body and the even greater calling of this nation. Let's stand together today and change Washington forever. Friends, colleagues, I urge you, while you are here, before retiring and lamenting the amount of time you spent raising money, co-sponsor the STOP Act. Join me in this effort to change Washington. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
The time of the